and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, today we're going to be discussing a topic that I think is worrying almost all parents all over the globe and not just in India, is the next educational year, especially the university year. In India, there are a lot of people who are putting in their applications, children who want to study abroad, because we all know the impossibility of getting into the universities here with the cutoffs, with the high cutoffs, and really the bizarre way the education system is working, the university system is working here. So what do we do about the global admissions, especially with lockdown, with the virus, with the quarantine? Does it make sense to send the children abroad right now this year? Should we defer a year? And also, how does online education work in the sense, it may not be the whole experience, but, there are different time zones. And also, how fulfilling is it? How, in terms of giving the education, imparting education, does it meet all the needs? Are we really geared up for it? These are some of the questions I'm going to be discussing on the roundtable today. Joining me is a panel of experts. I have Lakshmi Iyer. She is the Executive Director and the Head of Education at Sanam S4, which consults international universities in their global operations. Lakshmi herself has been in the field of education for past 18 years, and Sanam has about 70 higher education clients from 80 countries. It includes India, China, Southeast Asia, UAE, Latin America, Australia. I have also joining me Anjali Ragdeep. She is the founder of Overseas Education Consultancy Writers Guild that guides students who want to study abroad with their college applications. So I'm going to ask you, Anjali, if you have a lot of time on your hands or are you getting a lot of requests? Also joining me is Nayantara Handa. She is a Shivling Scholar and a University Guidance Counselor with a vast experience of advising undergraduates globally. And Nandika Handa, she is an immigration consultant for North America and also a guest columnist at the Financial Express. So she's going to help us tell you whether those visas are easy to get or not so easy to get, because that is the next step once you get your admission. So Lakshmi, I begin with you. I spoke about deferring a year. Are you getting a lot of requests from students who are actually considering that, they probably have their admissions, but they want to defer a year because, why pay so much? And also, online is not really part of the whole experience. You want the whole campus experience at the end of the day.
Thanks so much, Priya, for inviting me to participate in this panel. As you rightly said, as we gear up towards the so-called admission season in India, this is kind of becoming a very challenging year for students and parents. Firstly, many of our kids haven't kind of completed their qualifying examinations. And we are going through that hassle of figuring out how they are going to sit these examinations in July. Because both ISC and CBSE, for undergrad at least, they have said that the examinations will take place between 1st of July and 15th of July. And then you have the grad student aspirants who haven't kind of, really completed their university examinations. And on top of all of that, we have the added complication of students not knowing where they stand with respect to the campuses opening up overseas.
All right.
So under the circumstances, as you add all of these various things into the mix, what we have seen within Sanam S4 with our client institutions is that we are increasingly getting requests for deferrals. So since the time we went into the lockdown on March 24th, every week I have been conducting surveys, because I've got over 70 of my colleagues who support over 70 institutions from 8 different countries, and they are constantly engaging with students, parents, and other channel multipliers like agencies and so on and so forth, and also institutional stakeholders. Many of them work with local institutions as well. And the students remain optimistic, I guess, that is youth or whatever, but the parents are just not in a position to kind of, take a decision of wanting to send them at this point in time. So then the next best option is to defer the entry into 2021. And most universities have now started kind of, biting the bullet and saying, okay, we are probably going to postpone the opening of the campus towards, say, instead of September, we would open end of October or early November and so on, and then have kind of, a blended model then where some students are on campus, some are, sat in their rooms and studying. But in all of this, one factor that we also have to consider is that we are visa nationals. Large majority of our students are visa nationals. They have so they have to get a visa to go overseas.
Visa nationals, sorry, yes.
Study permits. And most of our embassies and high commissions here, they have been evacuated. So, it is a catch-22 situation, but we will see more deferrals is what I think.
More deferrals. Anjali, what is, have you also, been experienced, your experience has been the same?
I think I'm getting a mix. Definitely visas is a big question mark, but I think there is a lot of confusion in a student's mind whether they should defer or not. And I think premium universities are not making it easy for deferrals. One, they want a really good reason why you're deferring. So I'm talking about the US in particular. They want to know why you want to defer. And just because you're afraid to go and attend campus because of COVID, I don't think that is making a good enough reason. So if you're really stuck with visa applications, of course, that's, a given. But I think they're trying to get a gauge on how people are reacting and how many people, they have to fill in their seats. So they're looking at their yields. For example, UMass Amherst has, I believe that's what they've stated, they had 5,700 seats. And they've already filled up about 5,500. So, it's a big question mark, which I think we don't have enough answers right now. It's going to still take another month before the picture becomes very clear. Students are coming to us and saying, we want, what do you think? And right now our stand is wait and watch. Let's watch another month before we commit to anything. So that's how we're handling that.
Nayantara, will you share your experiences and advice? What would you say?
Yes, I think I tend to agree with what Anjali and Lakshmi have both said. It's a continuously evolving situation, and we don't quite know how the pandemic is going to play out worldwide. I think till a vaccine is not developed, there are not going to be any clear answers because parents are sort of apprehensive to send their children so far away. They're also apprehensive to be paying a huge sum of money for a provision that is possibly going to be online and not on site. I mean, having said that, though, I think I'm getting mixed opinions as well, because there are parents of the opinion who say that, look, this is the way the whole world is going to go now. It's possibly going to be a thing of the future. So I think students also have to learn how to adapt to a new situation and unlearn and relearn going forward. From the universities, of course, they need international students. They want a lot of diversity on campus. So I do feel that they're trying their best to make that provision something that is going to be valuable for the students. Even in terms of the online lectures, they're sort of modifying them to suit the students' best interests. But nothing compares, of course, to a campus experience. So I think therein really lies the dilemma. I think a month or two should give us really a clearer picture of what is in store for international students sort of worldwide.
Okay. Now, of course, while they're advising students to wait and watch, what is your advice, Nandita? Because, the next step is they come to you. So what would you tell them? What is happening so far?
Well, there is a lot of ambiguity in the air with all these changes in the law. Now, one thing I want to clarify, the students who do go back on their current F1s, as long as the F1s don't expire and the college is open, they are safe to go back.
Okay.
That is, a big worry for a lot of people. What is going to happen in the next year? We will have to wait and watch because there's a lot, happening in terms of a suspension in place, oncoming elections. So this is an area that we can't really comment about right now.
Okay.
Because
wait and watch.
Yes. Yeah. It is a wait and watch approach. There's nothing much we can do about it at the moment. But there might be changes. But it's important to remember that, international students bring in an excess of $46 million into the US economy.
So this will be more accommodating than the president is probably.
It should.
Lakshmi,
Yeah, can I come in here? I just wanted to add one thing into the mix here. I think with respect to grad and undergrad students, there is also the question of time. The undergrad students for any study destination, they are going to be spending a lot more time in the country and on campuses. And it is the postgrad students, the ones who are grad studies aspirants, they are the ones who are probably much more affected by the pandemic than the undergrad students, I feel. Because even if, you know, the undergrad students have the opportunity to say, do 50% of the first year offshore, you know, in their home country, they still have 2.5 years or 3.5 years, as the case may be, depending on the countries that they choose to go and study. But look at the grad students. In a country like the UK, it is just 1 year. In other countries, you know, possibly between 1.5 to 2 years. You know, there are students who probably are on a tight timeline because, you know, they have quit their jobs and they are wanting to kind of, you know, get a qualification and then come back. And so there is that difference in that kind of an experience, of course. And with respect to the US, because Nandika was talking about that, obviously we have the elections coming up in November. And one set of senators who have really kind of taken on the case of this OPT provision and saying that, you know, the US needs to kind of really reflect on this and take a pause. Obviously, 36 million Americans are without jobs. In that context, do we really need to be offering this OPT to foreigners who come into the country? Yes, $46 billion international students contribute to the US economy. But right now, it is so emotive. It is, you know, they are still kind of, you know, dealing with the pandemic. And then the enormous job losses that, you know, they have never seen in their history.
Yeah.
All of these things are going to kind of color their views about international students. Of course, another set of senators have now kind of taken on this and have put out a letter saying that no, the OPT provisions should not be kind of, you know, tampered with, because for the local economies, the students are extremely valuable. There are, you know, various sides to this debate as well.
Which is going on. So having said this debate that is going on, Anjali, and also the fact that US is one of the countries that is worst hit by the pandemic, would you be suggesting alternate destination, alternate countries, alternate colleges? Have you made such a list in mind? Or is that the kind of advice you would be giving?
So a lot of students, yes, we are also, you know, Canada is a great destination. But I think the pandemic to all the major countries, if you take UK, Canada, even Singapore, everyone is affected by it in one way or another. And, you know, universities are not normalizing immediately, even in the other destinations. So I think it has to be evaluated, like what Lakshmi has said, in terms of what is the aspiration of the student. If they want to pursue a job and they want to settle in that country, then I think we have to evaluate it in that respect. I completely agree with Lakshmi also that postgraduates are facing a very big dilemma because, you know, nobody goes to business school for business school. They go there for the networking. Right. And unfortunately, that's off the table when it's online. So, you know, so we're kind of grappling with the situation. And to answer your question, Priya, it's, of course, we are looking at other destinations, but we've always recommended other destinations as well, keeping in mind what the student's main goal is. Is it to settle down and get a job there? Or is it to return to the country after an A-class education and build something here? So I think those are the kind of questions that we need to address. And we've always addressed that, in fact.
And Nendra, taking off from what Anjali said about, you know, students missing out on the networking, because that, or even other experiences that happen when you're on campus rather than online. We've just had a set of, you know, last 3 months, a lot of kids have finished their courses online, their grad years or whatever. How has that been? Have you got feedback from any of your students that you placed abroad? How have they handled the online experience?
So I think a lot of them have adapted actually quite well, and kudos to them, because, you know, there are time differences, there are recorded lectures, not everything is happening live. It's a totally different sort of interaction actually altogether. I think the younger generation is a little more adaptive than we are to change. The feedback by and large has been quite positive. I think they are sort of, what I hear from my students, a lot of them are actually going with the flow and wanting to make the best of the situation. The other side of it is just to take on a little bit from what Anjali was saying. Generally, I noticed that we advise students to apply to at least 2 destinations.
Okay.
A minimum of 2 to 3 destinations, because we don't want them putting their eggs in one basket. I mean, this pandemic, of course, is totally out of the blue, but there could be so many other situations. They might not get into their first choice colleges in their first choice destinations, but they might get into a top choice college in their second choice destination. And they might, the application process itself is evolutionary in a sense. And so they might sort of go along a couple of months and say, oh, I hadn't thought of that. And I have this offer in hand now. And so let me actually this, or let me explore it. So I think most students have offers from at least 2 destinations in hand at the moment. So at least it gives them a diversity of choice and a few more options. I'm finding as well that Canada and the UK somehow are becoming increasingly popular in the current environment. The US is a little bit contentious, not so popular at the moment because of very obvious reasons, I think cited by everyone on the panel. The gap year students, or the students who are looking at taking a gap year, are facing a bit of a dilemma, frankly, because the gap year, of course, has to be well utilized, right? I mean, it's one thing to say that, okay, we're going to take a gap year, and that's great. And many students across the world actually choose to take it, especially internationally. Not so much of a trend in India, but across the world it is. But the gap year has to be well utilized. What is the value that gap year is bringing to you? Sorry, and I'm digressing a little bit from the question, but how well is a student planning that gap year? Now the options are limited because everything is sort of online. So whether it's in terms of internships, whether it's in terms of community service, in terms of travel, adventure, whatever it is that they're planning for themselves, those options are all limited at the moment. So the gap years, while it might be appealing in general circumstances, at the moment it might not be such a good option. Because again, we don't know how long these restrictions are going to be in place. You see, if it was just a month or 2, students can plan ahead. But we don't know if it's going to be a month or 2. So I don't know if the gap year, given this situation, is such a good option.
Yeah, I'm going to just come to you, Nandita, but I wanted Lakshmi's view on the gap year, and also the fact is that if everybody differs a year, then you're going to have a backlog for the next year also.
So I have actually kind of noted here 2-3 points which I want to pick up from what Anjali and Nayanthara were talking about. One is the question about other destinations. So as you know, the first onslaught of the disease was felt by the global south. So New Zealand and Australia were at the forefront because they have a massive February intake and they are overly reliant on the Chinese students. And then when the disease hit, their February intake suffered.
Okay.
But having said that, they are the first countries to recover, having flattened the curve, and have also now, they are talking about establishing a travel bubble between Australia and New Zealand. There are also discussions as they have come out of the pandemic with, for example, in New Zealand, in the last 2 weeks, they haven't had any COVID disease, reported. They are in discussions with the government to see how best they can bring the international students back into the country and open up the universities more or less fully towards the end of the year. But the interesting thing is going to be, as Nayanthara was talking about, parents getting worried about, how the Western world has really, they are all great in kind of putting out all these fantastic movies where they, kind of take on the world and solve the problems. But the way they have gone about, so the way they have kind of gone about dealing with the disease have left kind of, a lot to be kind of said, and parents are quite worried. So when they look, anyone who has decided to study overseas, they are going to study overseas at some stage. And they will look at countries that have done a really good job of kind of, dealing with the pandemic and also making sure that they have kept the population safe and also looked after their international students. So, and in the coming decade, we are going to see a lot of students wanting to study closer home because the pandemic will still be fresh in our minds. And we will see more, China, as you know, at this point in time is a massive destination in terms of its own kind of ambition to attract international students. So students will circulate, Asian students are going to circulate in this region. That is number one. Number two is the fact that, talking about the gap year. This is, we are all living in the time of lifelong learning and also reimagining how we are going to be working in the coming years. Virtual kind of gap year and virtual internships have taken off like nobody's business in the last 8 weeks that we have been in this lockdown situation. So as an example, usually in our US office, we take interns in our DC office. For the first time, we have now kind of expanded that internship into all of the US, and we have got 6 interns who are in different parts of the United States. And I think all of them working outside of the US because they've all gone back home and whatever. And the students are engaged in really meaningful projects that add value to what we are doing as a firm. So the mindset that, okay, I have to go out into the physical world and experience something in this, concentrated period of time, that is going to kind of, change till such time we come out of this pandemic. So there are some good things that will come out of this, but there are also some, we will have to do the course correction mid-flight and learn as we go along, which can be quite challenging and quite uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, the pandemic is going to kind of really change the education landscape.
And how? Yeah. So Anjali, some of the good things that have come out of the pandemic, do you have any good things that have happened in terms of education? And also what Lakshmi said about people wanting to study closer home. I don't see many people going to China though, but Southeast Asia maybe.
So your first question about whether there's been any positivity, I think the big positive I see is that people are accessible. Admissions officers, universities are really accessible, going out of their way to reassure you, to come on different platforms. And I think that has opened it out to an audience which was not available just in metros. So, earlier admissions officers would come, they would attend, they would have, say, August, September, where they would come and meet people in certain pockets. But now with webinars, and we've been hosting a bunch of them, we find that people as far as Vizag, people, in Chandigarh or, in Jalandhar, where people may not have had access to these people, are now joining these and hearing firsthand as to what is being offered at these universities, what are the challenges they're facing. I think that has been one very big positive. The second thing, which I think is amazing, is that the paradigm is going to shift so dramatically and quite soon. Education is going to become available to a lot more people. And I think that is the good that's come out of it. There is no longer going to be a tag of exclusivity on being educated. And you can follow simply anything you want to do if you're passionate enough and you have the discipline to do it. And I think more and more people are going to get engaged. I'm sure you've heard of Scott Galloway and his predictions of doom for US universities. But that's kind of a very extreme view. But yeah, I think that is definitely going to be a shake-up in how education is being conducted. And I think that's a big positive out of this. It's going to become accessible to millions of people who didn't have it.
So your home is going to be a university, I think, at the end of the day.
Home is going to be, yes.
I think, sorry, I'm just...
trademark that, Priya.
Yes, and just one more thing about positivity. I'm noticing with the students as well. They're finding time now because for the first time, I think after a long time, not having to commute to school and just sort of being home, they're finding the time to explore their own creativity and the interests and the hobbies that they might have totally lost touch with in this whole mad race of studies and exams and all of the things that they have to do on a day-to-day basis, which take up all of their time. So we suddenly have students who are painting, who have got back to their music, who are actually saying that, have time to just connect with family, sit down and read a book, just rediscover my coin collection, whatever it might have been, all of the things in everyday life that they just don't find the time to do anymore. So really they're rediscovering a side of themselves that I think they might have lost over the last few years. So I find that is a big positive for the students as well, I think, to have the time to just open a book and read. They don't have that time anymore. So now suddenly they do.
I couldn't
And they're
agree.
quite sort of happy about it.
There's a lot of nods from both Anjali and Lakshmi. Nandita, but this universities at home is not going to be good news for you, I guess.
Well, it's tough to say because we really don't know what's going to happen. As I said, F1s, will probably not be suspended. But adding on to what Lakshmi was saying, F1 is only one part of the equation. Students, want to build a future there. And along with that comes the OPT and, them building their careers through the OPT initially. And then, they move on to H1 or J1 according to their vocation. So we'll have to wait and watch. Let's see what happens at the end of June.
Okay, so you focus on North America, but you must have, are there other countries that are, being more accessible, being more welcoming, being more, even in terms of crisis, pandemic, they're reaching out?
Definitely. We see a lot of activity actually going towards Canada. A lot of people are naturally, turning towards Canada. It is a more easier path for the students at the moment. And even blending into, the economy and all will be easier just because of the laws there. Given the current situation, let's see if at the end of June or later something changes. But there is a lot of activity towards Canada. There's a lot of interest towards Canada, which is, where people might be naturally inclined to go next.
Okay, it looks like Canada is really emerging as one of the options. US is lost and Canada is gained at the end of the day. But we are totally out of time. Thank you so much, all of you. And I think, Lakshmi, what is it? June, Anjali, Lakshmi, all of you are saying that by June we should have a clearer idea. End of June. It's already June.
End of June.
End of June.
End of June.
Yeah.
So end of June,
So beginning July.
Yeah.
beginning July. So beginning July, I'm going to have you first week of July back again to give us some more clarity once we know exactly where we're headed. But I hope this debate does help. A lot of parents are questioning. I've seen a lot of concerns on social media as to what to do next, where to go, because it is a crucial year. It's an entire generation that is, putting their lives on pause. But as we've discussed here, maybe it doesn't have to be paused. Maybe there are other things you can do, like Nayantara says, read a book perhaps. But thank you for watching this show, and that's it for now. So we'll see you again in July with my panelists, but that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Priya. Thank you.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.